It is the latest model designed in the iconic DVL series that's been around since the very first Medarot release, sporting a more regal design compared to his predecessor. It is DVL05 Findillus, with a kit of Leg Killer, Spinning, Ghost Claw, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Heroic, which buffs any and all CG gained in any way, no matter what it is. Now, Findillus is a model that, at time of recording, we have actually seen a couple of times in the game as an enemy only NPC. So, realistically, he doesn't really bring anything we haven't already seen, aside from one brand new attack. But now that we finally have a stat breakdown on what he brings to the table, and just how good he is at what he does, we can finally give him a proper grade and see just how well he will perform once he gets into player hands. Leg Killer on the head part is a rather unique type of melee skill that has a very strange damage condition, but in those right conditions can be extremely catastrophic. Leg Killer, as the name suggests, means that if it targets the legs is where you get your damage bonus. That damage bonus is double damage and piercing if you're targeting the enemy's legs. Otherwise, it is basic damage with no piercing when attacking anything else. So at first glance, you might take one look at this and say, well, most medals tend to want to target legs anyway, so this is basically a free damage plus, isn't it? Well, you're not wrong. You are technically correct that a lot of metal natures tend to want to focus on legs primarily, but you also have to remember that a handful of others do also like targeting arms instead, based relative on if they have high heating and cooling or really low armor. So this is going to be a part you want to pay extremely close attention to with the metal nature if you want to make the most of it. Now, this isn't guaranteeing that it's going to target only that every single time, but if you can have any kind of say in how Leg Killer behaves, metal nature is the way to do it. But even then, having a base power of 1900 is still going to be a pretty nasty hit all the same, but being able to bump that up even higher to 3800 and piercing is still equally hard to ignore. Spinning on the right arm is another very unique melee attack that gets a damage plus relative to its CG gain, very similar to how Ghost or Beam Sword or anything else of the like behaves. But Spinning has a very unique condition on the fact that it's basically like a reverse microwave or microshock. That being said, it does get a damage plus relative to CG, like I said, but it also has a suction effect applied to self. This means that when attacking the target, you not only nuke them with everything you have in your CG, in your charge gauge, but you also pull the enemy closer to you, giving Findillus just a little bit of a hand in crowd control, with the ability to temporarily stall an enemy and pull them back to the command line. However, if mistimed, this does also mean they may accidentally accelerate their heating time if it catches them on the heat phase. The only real cost to spinning, however, is the fact that upon use, it does also self-destruct. So this means that unless you have someone on the team that can restore broken parts, you're only going to get one use of it. But it is also worth noting that given that spinning is a CG reliant and not HP reliant like Sacrifice, if the part is brought back even at 10% HP, you're still going to be making very good use of it all the same and fight just as powerfully as you was after that first blow. Ghost Claw on the left arm, and the only new skill that Findillus is introducing, is essentially as simple as it sounds. It's basically Ghost, which is a defense-ignoring move with damage plus relative to CG, but instead of a piercing effect, it is a scatter effect, which means it will damage one part normally and then two others randomly for extra damage. At the cost, however, that, much like regular Ghost, you cannot dodge or defend in your cooldown, which will leave you wide open to punish if you're not properly protected. Biped Legs means that Findillus will have relatively solid coverage across all terrains fairly nicely overall, and his stats across the board are not too shabby either, with some good armor and some very solid speed. When it comes to mobility, he's packing 896, which is very, very good, as it means he can definitely get off on the right foot in the speed department with no major compensation or bolstering with terrain or Medarot. An evade of 1177 isn't too shabby either, as it means he can dodge or graze fairly well, but given that he's got a lot of very strong attacks, you are going to have to pay very close attention to him, because if he's using something that puts him in a no dodge or no defense state, this is unfortunately kind of pointless. A melee resist of 1539 is nice, as it means he can hold his own up close and personal fairly well, and a shoot resist of 822 is not terrible, but also not great either. Ideally, you want to keep your resist stats anything above 1000 if you want to try to keep your damage as low as possible. But in the armor department, however, he's packing 4319 for the head, 3899, 3900 for the right arm, just almost 4000 for the left, and over 4000 for the legs, which means that even if his leg resist isn't great, like it's still fairly solid, but not great as far as that shoot resist is concerned, he is still fairly healthy as far as the HP department is. This is where it matters most. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Findillus a pretty well-rounded 7 out of 10, and in a lot of very weird ways, he is actually kind of synergetic unto himself. The leg ability of Heroic, which buffs his CG gain in any way that he earns it. This can be from charging Metaforce, to Metal Nature, to even Medarot granting him CG. Any kind of CG he gained is boosted up to 30% or more thanks to this leg ability alone, and that'll synergize extremely well with Spinning and Ghost Claw. However, it is worth noting that given that Spinning is a self-destructive move, once he uses it, unless he's got someone on the team that can restore broken parts, he's only got one use of it. And Leg Killer, as powerful as it can be, is also extremely finicky, as if it's not targeting legs, you're going to be missing out on a lot of your damage potential. However, it is also worth noting that 2 of his attacks as well only have a success of just barely 700 to mid 700s, which means aside from Spinning, and even then Spinning is going to be kind of pushing it, he's going to be kind of blind. So you're going to want to make sure that you catch the enemy on a no dodge state, or you're going to guarantee it's going to be a chance he might miss. However, as mixed parts though, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at a 7.5 out of 10, given that all 4 of his parts are actually quite powerful in their own right, but together you can probably fine-tune his synergy just a little bit, such as giving him something more conventional on an arm or a head so that he can feed back into Heroic just a little bit easier, such as, say, with First Aid to use Spinning more than once, or Charge Plant or something similar, to really feed back into Spinning and Ghost Claw to make them as painful as possible, as quickly as possible.